let's talk about CSS. I would like to do some prototyping to play around with the basic and maybe not that basic CSS rules, right? So I have a very simple app with me. So you can see on the left-hand side, I have the editor. On the right-hand side, I have the browser. I'm even going to open DevTools, right? So this is my favorite setup, right? I have on the left-hand side the editor. Generally speaking, I have two columns, the JavaScript, React component, and the CSS. On the right-hand side, I have the browser, which again is two columns, the result, and then the DevTools, right? That obviously works much better with a larger screen. But hey, it's what it is, so let's try to deal with it. So I have a very rudimentary piece of HTML, div, hello CSS, right? And then it gets hello CSS displayed. Just some smoke test. Then I change something, and then the browser automatically reflects the changes, right? Do you know why we call these kind of things smoke tests? Smoking. Yes. So this comes from the old times. This is not about coding. So in the old times when you wanted to check if the engine of a car worked, right? They check from the back, and if there was some smoke, right, then the car works, right? That doesn't mean it works. Maybe not, right? But hey, the feeling is good, right? If there is some smoke in the car, it's like something is going on, right? Right. So sorry for the off topic, and then. So let's start from the very, very basics. How do I change the background color of the title? Yes, background color. Yes. Background, here. Background color. No. Color. Yes, I want to change the background color of the title. Background. No, so app, look, if I look on the right-hand side, I can see what app is. So app points to the title, right? So then I put .app, so that I want to change the background color of the blue box to yellow.
On selector .app, you have to put the background color.
Yes, I did it?
No, it's not correctly.
Why is not correct?
After background, you have to put the minus.
The minus, why? What's the name of these naming conventions?
Oh, is it?
We learned that yesterday. That's camel. Right, so is camel case how CSS works? No. How CSS works?
Burger.
The what? The burger. I love that. Burger case. Does it exist? Maybe, I don't know, burger case, right? Probably not. Cool. You made my day, Daniel. Let's use kebab case, right? So with kebab case, now we can change the color to anything, right? Yellow, for example, right? And then it works. It's easy, right? Then of course we can put any color, yellow, green, right? In reality, most of the time, we don't play with such basic colors. So look, we can be Visual Studio, we can pick custom colors, right? So once you select a color, Visual Studio will automatically, So with modern JavaScript, with modern CSS, we can use RGB, right? We can also use hexadecimal. So maybe you've seen that hash. So for example, a nice blue, right? So yeah. So we have several options, right? So this is about the background. How do we change the color of the text to white, for example? Just color. Some people got confused. Some people think this is text color or font color. No, just color, right? Which is, to me, that's not very nice. But hey, it's what the standard is, right? So we need to stick to the standard. Right. So now the title looks better, but standard for CSS. Why? Because someone thought that was a good idea to name it color and background color. To me, that should be text color or maybe font color, probably font color, I believe. That should be the standard, right? But anyway, it's what it is. So how do we add some space? Because you see the text is on the very left. Margin. Margin or padding? What's the difference between margin and padding?
Margin give the space outside the box.
That's correct.
Padding give it inside the box.
That's correct. That's correct. We'll play with both. So margin, look, if I put margin 30 pixels, look at the blue box. You see? So margin happens outside of the box. And padding happens inside of the box. Look. You see? Right? Oh, nice, right? Cool. So if you want to get a better control on what's padding, what's margin, blah, 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 you can do something. If you check in the Elements panel in DevTools, you have something called Computed, that generally speaking will be on the right-hand side. And even though on the projector the quality now is horrible, but I can tell you what's going on here. So that will be a bit better, right? So here you can inspect you know what's the name of that structure? This is the box model, right? So you may get this question on your first job interview. What the box model is? This is the box model. The box model is the set of rectangles that surround each element in HTML. So first of all, the inner one, and now probably because I set a blue color, and blue color is not the best one, let me put something different, purple. Yeah, that will work a bit better, right? So with purple, you see that I can hover each individual element of the box model. So first of all, the inner one, that's the content. Then we have the padding. The padding still happens inside of the box, inside, right? And then we got the border. We don't have any border there. We'll go to the border in a minute. And then we have the margin. You see, if I hover the margin, you can see this salmon color, right? Proving that the margin happens outside. So the margin is essentially the space between your house and your neighbor's house, right? That's pretty much it. Let's add a border. How do we add a border to my sexy purple box? Border. Border what?
1 pixel, 2 pixel.
10 pixels.
Solid black.
Solid black, right? So border receives three properties. The width of the border, the type of the borders. This is solid, but that could be dotted. No one ever uses that. Well, yes, you can see that, you know, when you can do drag and drop, right? So here speaking, when you hover, you get this dotted. Yeah.
How does don't you put commas in between? Like
No commas, just spaces, no commas.
just spaces?
Yes, spaces, that's correct, no commas at all.
What if you put it like so? What if you press enter right now to put it on like
You press enter.
yeah, so that will put black on the next line.
Like that?
It still works.
That's a good question.
Should be working.
It works, but to me that feels a bit weird. So generally speaking, CSS rules, you put them in one line. Yeah.
I just want to know.
Yeah. Okay, so we have different border styles, and then obviously the color, black, red, whatever, right? So let's leave it solid, right? So then again, we can see the differences on the box model: content, padding, border. You see now the border, right? And then the margin, right? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So box model, content, padding, border, margin. That's pretty much it. And now let's complicate the example a bit. So I'm going to change the size of the windows a bit, and I will remove the margin because I want to simplify the example a bit. So now the box fits all the space. What happened if I add width 100%? Takes the whole screen. Not really. Not really. It takes more than the whole screen. You notice? Where is the right border? So the box ends here, something like there, right? What's going on? Width 100%, but in reality the actual width is more than 100%. Why?
So the padding. The
Because
borders.
of the padding. Okay, it's just because of the padding, Rich?
The border.
Correct, correct. This is one of my least favorite things in CSS. So by default, if you put width 100%, it will set the width to 100%, but if there is any padding, if there is any border, then this will be added to this 100%. So the actual width is 100%. Can you tell me the exact width of the box? So it's 100% plus how many pixels? 10 pixels? Wrong. Why 10 pixels? 30, 40, 60, how many? 80, 40, 20. I think Rich is correct. 80. Why 80, Rich?
So you've got 230 paddings and 10 borders.
Correct. That's correct. Look, let's hover. Let's hover again. Look. So this is 100%. The blue box is 100%. But then we got 30 pixels on the left, 30 pixels on the right. So we got 60 extra pixels. But if that wasn't enough, we got 10 pixels on the border on the left and 10 pixels of the border on the right. Such a disaster, right? So generally speaking, if we set width 100%, we want to make sure that the box ends on the viewport, right? So if there is any padding, if there is any margin, any exotic CSS rule, that should happen inside of the 100%, right? So how do we change that behavior? Border box. Border box what? Border box?
Box sizing for the box.
Box sizing, correct. Right? Look at now. You see? Now it's beautiful because now it's as 100%, still has the padding, so we haven't lost any CSS, right? Still there, but now we can clearly see that it exactly matches the size of the window. And
so,
if we,
sorry, can I ask a question? So that's a command. It doesn't. You don't have to change any of your numbers.
no, just put that. No, that's it. Just put the command box size in, and then CSS will recalculate the width of all your elements, right? So to me, that should be the default behavior of CSS. Why? Because in reality, I want that behavior for every single box in my web application. And I may have hundreds and thousands, or even maybe hundreds of thousands of elements, and I don't want to type this line hundreds of thousands of times, right? So that's why that should be the default behavior. However, assuming that this is not the default behavior, do you know how to avoid doing this all the time? Create a function. You cannot create functions in CSS.
Put it in the parent element.
Sorry, wait a minute. So, Rich, can you say it again?
Can you put it in the parent element?
In the parent. That could
Or
be.
in the CSS file that you're including in each of your.
Let's try that. Let's try that. Okay, so we got the HTML element. This is the root element. Every web page, the root element is the HTML, right?
Body.
Or in the body, yeah, or in the body. Fine, let's put it in the body, right? So if we check the body, right, the body wraps everything, right? Every website has a body. So can we put it there? Let's try that. No, it doesn't work, unfortunately. So if we put box sizing on a parent element, it will work fine for that particular element, but it won't work fine for the child elements. So that's unfortunately in the head. Not in the head, because the head is just for metadata, right? So no, it needs to be in the body. But that doesn't work, right? So how do we do that? There is a way to do that, definitely.
If you put relative size.
Not really, not really. Probably the easiest way to do that is using a wildcard. We can do that in CSS. Right? So here we say, hey, for every element, just apply that rule. Right? We shouldn't abuse the wildcard because that could be a bit, noisy. Because that wildcard, asterisk. Right? It's an asterisk. Right? So then, we don't need to keep putting box sizing for every div. Every element will inherit, right? And of course, if one day after having some drinks, we decide that we want to change the behavior in one particular element, then that's fine. we can put box sizing, and then we can change it, for example, to content box, which is the default, right? So now every element will have box sizing border box, but the app, because on that element we revert the rule, right? Right. So any questions so far?
I mean, I'm a little bit confused by that wildcarding and the scope of it. So when will that no longer apply?
It will apply every time unless someone overrides the default rule. We'll do a particular workshop about what we call specificity, which is a very important principle in CSS. Specificity means if you define two rules, opposite rules on the same element, which one wins? So we'll talk about priorities. This is a good example of a specificity. We have the same rule talking about different things, right? Which one wins and why? We'll learn how specificity works, because that's also a classic job interview question. Apart from that.
So the problem is,
Yep.
you see that aspect of wildcard?
Yep.
Does it mean it's applying to all classes?
No, not just classes, to every single element. Even if the element doesn't have any class. Look, it will be applied to the first div, to the H1, and that's it, right? To all the elements in your DOM, in your HTML.
When you put it up, will also apply for everything.
Yeah.
So
On the app, you mean?
yeah.
No, on the app, look, so we added a class name called app. So when we do .app, these styles will be applied to this element and whatever is inside. It's important to notice that some CSS properties got inherited. For example, the color, right? So the color is applied to the title, right? But we haven't changed the color of the title. We have changed the color of the parent, right? Where do we have the color? Look, the color is on the app, but the children element inherit that property. So some properties in CSS are inherited, right? We'll talk about all these things when at the time we talk about specificity.
If there was another child element, then how would it behave? Would it
Another child element, well, we can do it, right? So we can add another div in between, right? And we can put the title inside of the new div, and that will be perfectly fine. It still works, right? Because the properties are cascade down. So if we have a color here, it will be cascade down, right? Here and there. So unless someone else here overrides the color, by default, right? That will be cascade down.
if there was another box underneath?
Another box underneath. Here,
No, the hello CSS. You would have like one more hello JavaScript.
here,
That would apply for both.
In a separate box.
in a separate box here,
Yes.
okay? Right? So that will be the same thing, of course. Because both elements
This last app.
are inside of the master one, right? It's cascade down, it's inherited.
It's parent.
Because it's parent, correct.
This CSS inside the JavaScript or yeah?
It's not inside JavaScript. So we have the JavaScript file.
Security, I mean.
No. So this is a
Different kind of.
so this is HTML inside of a React component.
A React, yeah.
Yes, correct.
That's why we say class name. That.
Yes, correct.
We say class.
Yes, correct. That's a good point. If you've done some HTML before the bootcamp, you probably learned that to
Yeah.
declare a class, you need to type class, right? If we do that, and if we pay attention to the console, that is something we should be doing all the time, the message we got is invalid DOM property, class. Did you mean class name? Because React doesn't like class. Because class is a reserved word in JavaScript. Look, we use it here. So React struggles to understand if we want to add a class name in CSS or if we want to declare a new React component. To avoid this confusion, what React, even though it works, you see, it still works.
Yeah.
So what React suggests is to rename it to class name. And then look, the error will disappear. You see, no errors anymore in the console.
The class name should be with the capital. letter, right?
No, not necessarily. No. You can put lower here, right? And then you can change it here as well, right? Because CSS is case sensitive, right? The only recommendation is, and this is my personal suggestion, every time you create a React component, you'll start creating React components on task number 7. Please add a class name on the root element, on the first one, with capital, with the same name as the component. What's the name of the component? App, no problem. Then add a class name on the root element called app with capital A. And then add a CSS with the same name, you see? So we got app.javascript and then app.css, and on the app.css, then we got the app element, right? That's the suggestion. We'll talk about folder structure and all these things, how to organize your components, right? Because that will scale. Eventually, you'll have lots of components. So we'll talk about the things. But for now, my suggestion is do a class name, put a class name in the root element with the same name as the class name, as the proper component name. Sorry.
So if it was another component, what I meant before is to have two separate ones.
Yep.
And how the wildcard will apply? Will it apply for both?
Yeah, the wildcard will apply everywhere. Right.
But if you added an additional line in those columns, so would it have to be a different class
Here,
for it to be a different component?
so, okay, I'm adding a new class called JavaScript. So then I can put here .javascript, and then, so what's the question?
Yeah, the question was if it wasn't like a child element of the app.
That's a child element of the app.
But if it wasn't, so
If it wasn't,
then
okay, so it's separate component, correct. Yeah.
and then there's a wildcard, which means that the rule applies for everyone.
Everywhere, yeah.
And then you added the boxing size, revoking the wildcard
Yes,
border box.
yes,
So would that only apply within those up?
yeah, of course.
And the wildcard will still apply for everything?
Yes, we'll talk about the specificity. I don't want to mix things because otherwise we are not going to progress. But yes, we'll talk about that, Dave, at some point. Right, any questions so far? No? Okay, let's talk about positioning a bit. So when we talk about positioning, and some of you have already been playing with that, so I'll remove the JavaScript one just for simplicity reasons. So what happened if I don't want the hello CSS message to be here, I want the hello CSS message to be floating, right? So, you know, like the overlay. So whenever I want to hide it, and whenever I hover the purple box, I want to show it. So I'm going to add a class name overlay. How do we hide the overlay by default? Display none.
Can you use visibility on visibility hidden?
Can we use visibility hidden? That's a good question. What's the difference between display none and visibility hidden? There is an important difference. Visually speaking, is the same, right? Yes, yeah, nothing gets rendered. But look at the difference. So I'm going to put the message on top. Hello, Poppy. Right. So with display none, in the middle we have hello CSS. With display none, the element is literally removed. It's nowhere. But if we put visibility hidden, you see the difference. It's still there, but it's transparent. It's invisible. So visibility hidden respects the element. You'll see in a minute. You see, the overlays are still there. It's invisible, but that's still there. However, with display none, pop, it's nowhere. It's removed, right? So that, it depends what you want to do. Generally speaking, visibility hidden, we don't really use that much. But display none, we use it a lot because we literally want to remove it, right? So, based on that, so let's have a couple of changes. So how do we change the height of the app element. For example, 300 pixels. How do we do that? Height. Correct. What happens if I don't put any unit? Jeff? Correct. So remember to explicitly say what's the width of the box, right? Otherwise, the browser may not be able to determine if we want to put pixels, percent, or whatever, right? Yeah, exactly. So just remember to keep the units. Right, so we have a nice box, nice purple box. And I want to display the hello CSS at the bottom, the overlay, right? Or first of all, before displaying at the bottom, before thinking about positioning, how do we display the overlay at all on hover?
Right, dot overlay, dot, then hover. And then
It is color, correct? Because that's not a
yeah,
class.
that's what I said.
It's a no. You
Double,
said
I
you
said
said
double.
double what?
Double dot.
Double whiskey.
I need to write down these names, because I forget.
Yeah.
I keep forgetting the
So,
names.
so that's the column, right? Because that's the way we hover elements in
Yeah.
CSS. So then, what happened on hover?
What we want to do to put down?
To display the message.
Ah.
Display, block. Right? So now when we hover, oh, what is it? What's going on, guys? No,
Position.
no, wrong.
Do we need to add something to dot overlay dot hover?
Dot overlay, dot hover.
Yeah, do we need to add something to the end of that?
No, not to the end. No.
Isn't it displayed online?
No. I'll tell you what you propose. You propose. The-
Hover, you need no overlay hover.
Yeah. So when you have the overlay, display none. So the overlay is invisible. When you hover the invisible element, then display. Does it make sense?
No.
The overlay cannot be hovered because it doesn't exist.
Display.
No, that's wrong. This line is wrong. Doesn't matter what you put here. That's wrong.
No.
That's wrong because you cannot hover the overlay. It's hidden. It's nowhere.
If you want to cover the FGS, the purple box, you need
Yes.
to put the up.
We want to hover the purple box.
Yes, the up cover.
Up then.
That's the element we want to hover. Right? So how do we do that?
Up. So change the overlay on the up.
Here? Below here? No, afterwards. Here? Before. Before what? Here? In the same line?
Instead
No,
of
change the
overlay.
delete the overlay.
Delete overlay, up, hover,
After hover,
yeah,
space,
space.
overlay. Dot overlay, yes.
So, will this work?
Should be. Yeah.
Oh, nice. Wow. That's the future, right?
Yeah.
So, question. Why do we need a space here? What happens if I get rid of the space?
Won't work.
Why?
Will.
It's not it is a CSS. That's valid. That's a valid CSS structure.
It's not a property of hover.
That's kind of
Because it's like dot, it's a separate.
correct. It's a separate element. Correct. So that structure is very interesting. Whenever we put a space, the message we are sending to CSS is, hey, please find an element called with class name app, and then on hover, the space means find a child element inside of the app with class name overlay and change the display from none to block. Right? So that's why the space is important. So, for example, if I go to line number 14, will it work?
Yes.
Right? So that's the same thing, right? Find an element called app, and then inside of the element app, find another element with class overlay, and then hide it. Right? So generally speaking, this is a good practice. I recommend you to do that all the time. Why? Because here we are namespacing our CSS. What happens if tomorrow we create another component with class overlay by coincidence? That new element will inherit
Yeah.
all these things, right? We don't want that. We want that CSS to apply to this component, not to other components. That's why here, it will apply to all the overlays that are inside of the app component, right? So please always remember to namespace your CSS. So the very first thing you put is .app or .tvshow or .cover, you know, the name of the component. So first the name of the component, and then whatever you want to do, right? Any question? No? How can we make the overlay to show at the bottom instead of there?
Bottom.
Bottom. Where? Here. Bottom. 0. Right. Bottom. Right? Will it work, yes or no? No. What? It should be an app. No, because if we put it here, it will move maybe the purple box. I don't want to move the purple box. I just want to move the overlay.
In hover.
In hover. Okay, so Acel proposed to put it here, right? Will it work, yes or no? Yes, no, yes, no. That won't work, guys.
Huh?
No. Why not? Why not? Why not? Because bottom only applies, well, no, not only, but it will mostly apply to elements with position absolute. Right? By default, CSS is based on blocks, and you cannot move these blocks around the screen that easily, because the blocks will get displayed one after the other. So it's not that easy to float an element around the screen. So which property do we need to put to float an element around the screen?
Position absolute.
Correct.
Position.
And now, what's going on? What is it? It's at the bottom. Okay, let's see, let's prove the theory. I'm going to change the color to black. Because if it's white, if it's at the bottom, we cannot see anything. Oh,
Ah.
oh, oh.
On the parent, you have to put the position relative.
On the padding, we have to put position relative. That's interesting. Why? Yeah, that's correct. That's correct. So when we have an element with position absolute, if we change bottom or top or left or right, if we change where the element gets displayed, bottom 0, but 0 regarding what? What's our reference, right? By default, unless we are crystal clear, CSS will consider that the boundaries are the page itself. Everything. This is the viewport, the white box, right? So that's why it gets displayed at the very bottom of the screen, right? To change that, we can simply tell CSS where the boundaries of the element are. So we can select a parent element. So this is the overlay. So we can select a parent element, this one, and we can tell, hey, please, bottom 0 of that element. How do we do that? We need to go to the parent element and change the position to what? To relative. That's correct. In other words, so whenever an element has position absolute, CSS will look for the first parent component that has position relative. If it finds it, then look, brilliant. If it doesn't find it, it will display it at the bottom of the screen. Right? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Question for you. I don't really like that, particularly speaking. So we are declaring lots of properties of the overlay on hover.
Overlays.
Yes, correct. So I personally suggest to put it on the overlay. Because on the overlay is where we declare all the properties. And then on hover, we just change the minimum. What's the minimum thing? The visibility, right? Everything else will remain static. And of course, that still works. Makes sense, right? Cool. And how do we know the element to get animated from the bottom? Like, you see? Because now it's either visible or invisible. But how can we make it to, slide up from the bottom of the purple box? Transition. No, well, transition. Okay, transition what?
Transition, the time,
The time? For example, 1 second,
Yeah.
and then what?
the style, so it could be, isn't it the style of the transition? So
Is, for example, could be linear, could be cubic.
And when it's finished.
specify what direction you want to.
The direction?
yeah.
What's the direction?
Also, from what or
What? Auto? Bottom, like that.
But the 1 second is at the end, no? Oh,
I don't know. Who said it should be on the other way around? Ashley. Ashley is correct. That's not correct. That's not correct. So it works on the other way around. So first of all, you specify which property do you want to animate? Bottom. And then how long will it take to animate? 1 second. And then what's the type of the animation? That one. We'll see afterwards how can we change that. So, okay, we got that. And then what? Is that it? Anything else? Doesn't work, right? Doesn't do anything. Why?
Have to put the height.
The height. The height of what? No, you don't need to put any. You don't need any height. Not. You can put a height, but it's not strictly necessary. Correct. 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 Where? Here. So by default, where is it going to be displayed? Bottom 0. Bottom 0. Right. So at the moment, bottom 0 is there. But I want by default to get displayed somewhere like there. And then on hover, I want to change the bottom to 0. So in other words, I want by default, bottom, for example, minus 100 pixels, for example, right? So by default, it will be here. And then on hover, it will correct. Will it work?
Yeah.
No.
No?
No. We're close, but there is something wrong.
it's not bottom 0 pixels.
No, that's a good point. That's the only exception. When you put bottom 0, you don't necessarily need to put pixels because 0 pixels is the same as 0% and it's the same as 0 EM, right? So 0 is the only exception. You don't need to put, the units. You can put them if you want, right? If you feel more comfortable, feel free. Right, but that still doesn't work. It doesn't work because of that. That's important. When we deal with transitions, they are not really compatible with display none and display block. Because why? I don't know why, but they are not really compatible. Because as soon as we hover, it gets displayed. I don't know. It doesn't work fine. So if you want to do some transitions, you cannot do that. Look. Getting better, right? Right. So that looks good. However, generally speaking, we don't want to display the overlay outside of the purple box, right?
Yeah.
We don't want that. That's not very elegant. How can we tell CSS, please hide whatever happens beyond the purple box?
Overflow hidden.
Overflow hidden. Daniel is correct. Where do we put overflow hidden? Up or overlay? So
No,
overlay here. Okay. Overflow hidden. Wrong. Wrong. Right. So here, wait a minute. Overflow hidden means whatever happened beyond the boundaries of the overlay, yes, hide it. But in reality, the problem is not with the overlay. The problem is here. We want to control the boundaries of the app, right? So we need to move that, right? So now, look, you see? Why is hidden? Because the overlay is beyond the boundaries of the app, right? It solves the problem because now if I hover, as soon as the overlay gets inside of the purple box, then it's visible.
Then is it possible to start on the purple box and then the overlay moves up?
To what, sorry?
To start inside the purple box.
Well, that's up to you, right? You can change the bottom on the overlay. Where is the overlay? Here. Instead of, you can put it at the bottom, and then when you hover, you can move it up. So look now, right? Yeah, that's your whatever you want to do, right? Right. So, a couple of things. That's pretty much it, right? I'm not going to take any longer today. But just a couple of hints. First of all, whenever you need to deal with hover and things like that, it's to me this is tiring, right? Because why? For example, if I want to prototype the color of the background color of the purple box, I can simply select the purple box, and then I can go to the CSS and I can change it, right? From purple to blue to red. So it's very easy to prototype, right? But let's try to do the same thing with let's try to change the color of the overlay. Okay, so, you know, with the purple box, I can select the box like that, and then I change it. But with the overlay, it's like, I can't, right? It's complicated, right, to select the overlay element, right? Because of that, fortunately, Chrome, a couple of years ago, introduced a very nice thing. So if you select the app, you can simulate a hover event. You see that button, called hop. So if you click on it, so then even though we are not explicitly hovering, now Chrome is simulated what happened when the user hovers, right? You see this yellow button, this yellow circle, element that hover. It's simulating, right? Because now it's stable, I can easily select it, and I can easily change any property, like color, green, right? Also, one more thing. Sometimes animations, they may run very fast. So, for example, what happens if I change the speed to 0.1 seconds, 100 milliseconds? It's very quick, right? Which may be okay. But what happens if that's just a complex animation that we want to have full control? So in Chrome, you have an animations panel at the bottom, and then you can simulate, you can slow down the animation for testing purposes. For example, 10%. So now, look. It's slower, right? We can do that. Also, one more thing, and this is a bit, I got the feeling that whoever did that in the Chrome team, that was not really, it's a weird thing. I love it, but I never use it in a professional way. But let me show you. So if we now hover, let me find the transition, which runs on the overlay. If I find it, yeah, look, you see, this is what we typed before, right? So we can actually change the speed here. So for example, to 3 seconds. Remember, whatever you change here, this is not going to be persisted. As soon as we refresh the browser, these changes are lost. We need to persist them in Visual Studio. But hey, for testing purposes, that's good. So now that should run, maybe let's put it 100% again, 3 seconds. Okay, 3 seconds. You see, it's not linear, right? So linear means we can change that. Linear, I think it's linear. Oh, well, I'm typing nowhere, right? So give me a second. Linear. Here we go. So now, not sure you can see the difference, but now the speed is constant. You see? Linear means the speed is constant. If we change linear to is, it will accelerate and decelerate. You see? It's subtle, but it happens, right? But also, if that's not enough because you want to make something absolutely amazing, you can click on that button, and then you can, visually speaking, customize the animation. That's pretty cool, right? And we can even do some bouncing.
How will you add that to the
We'll see in a minute, because once you finish, right, it will give you the result, so you can copy and you can paste it here on the left-hand side, right? Yeah, I'll show you. So look. It's pretty cool, right? You can ruin your productivity of your day doing these things. So then, if you want to persist these changes, just, copy that line, and then go to your CSS, and just paste it, right? Oh, was looking after the break lines and everything. So that doesn't work because I forgot to copy so I copied the value but not the key. So that's transition, something like that, right? So now if we refresh the browser, that should be persisted. Right? Right, transitions, right? We'll also learn the differences between a transition and an animation. So with modern CSS, we can do both things. Even though visually speaking, it may be challenging to spot the differences. Technically speaking, there are some differences. But we'll learn that in the future. So I think that's pretty much it for today, guys. Any question? Is there any particular thing about CSS that you want to talk about? You never want to talk about that again? Right.
I don't know, CSS is just, I don't like it, I don't know. I'm expensive to
Right.
find it.
So,
CSS only for style of customizing the content, there's no other function.
no, just UI, right? Just UI, yeah. One of the things that I would like to introduce before the end of the bootcamp is less CSS. You ever heard about less CSS? Right? So you know, we got JavaScript, right?
Yeah.
You know why we have React? Why we use React instead of pure JavaScript? It's a framework because it facilitates, right, building a web application. So less CSS is the same for CSS. CSS is good, but still is very limited. With less CSS, we can do more powerful things. For example, we can create functions. You mentioned a function before. So we can reuse CSS easily with less CSS, right? But we'll learn that towards the end of the bootcamp.
Yes.
No. So the comparison between React and JavaScript is the same than less CSS and CSS. So less CSS is a framework that runs on top of CSS to facilitate the process of creating styles. Right? But I thought it's interesting to learn first of all the fundamentals of CSS, and then we may learn how to get more efficient with less CSS. Any question, guys?
So, since you talk about less CSS, what about Bootstrap? Is it similar?
No, not really. So Bootstrap is a library that offers you a bunch of class names out of the box. So for example, with Bootstrap, if you want to add a home icon to a button, you can do something like icon-home, just pseudocode, right? So whenever you add that class to your HTML, Bootstrap will automatically add the icon for you, right? So Bootstrap is essentially a utility that gives you some iconography, some layout utilities for free, right? However, less CSS doesn't give you anything for free. It just gives you a different way to create your CSS assets.
There are different kinds of bootstraps, like, are they language specific or?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. I think you're speaking, when we talk about Bootstrap, we talk about CSS utilities, yes.
Because how about Python with Django is not?
No, but that's a separate thing. I don't think that's any related to Bootstrap. So Bootstrap plays with CSS. Yeah?
Are those still widely used, Ricardo? Or?
That's a good question. So the thing is, lots of companies, they use Bootstrap, right? But eventually, if you join a good team with a solid product, they are not going to use Bootstrap. I don't use Bootstrap, right? Why? Nothing. I create everything by myself. Because if you create everything by yourself, you have full control, right? So Bootstrap, I mean, don't get me wrong, if you want to create a portfolio, basic things, it's nice, right? Because for free, you get lots of utilities, so that's good. But eventually, if you want to create a complex piece of software, you don't want to depend on what Bootstrap offers you. You want to be able to customize your app completely, colors, layout, everything. That's why you end up creating your own bootstraps.